Welcome to the Scottish Paranormal Podcast. I'm your host Chris, and here we'll be delving into the multitude of strange occurrences that happen within Scotland and beyond. You can contact us with your accounts at the Scottish Paranormal Podcast at gmail.com. You can find us on all social media channels, and you can contact us by either means. Tonight's episode we have Dr. Robert Davis on the show. He's an internationally recognised neuroscientist, former college professor and researcher. He's the author of over 60 scholarly articles and a number of books such as UFO Phenomenon, Life After Death and Unseen Forces. He's currently working on a project with David Beaty on consciousness, which is called The Conscious Connection. We'll leave all the information in the show notes where you can find Bob Davis's work, and we'd just like to get right into it now, and we welcome Bob into the show. Welcoming in Bob Davis onto the show tonight. So Bob Davis, as discussed previous, he's an international recognised neuroscientist, professor and author, made many books on UFO phenomena and near-death experience, and also currently producing and developing a documentary on consciousness called The Conscious Connection. So welcome to the show, Bob. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing fine, Chris, and thank you for the invitation. And it's really a pleasure to be with you. I have a great respect for the work you do. Thank you for again.
Yeah, same here for the work you do as well. So my main kind of thing, I'd like to go right back to brass tacks. I know you've come right through the mill and you've been working on this subject for many, many years. But I'd like to know what took scientist, neuroscientist, professor, coming right through the kind of scientific kind of mill, and what took you into researching UFOs, near-death experience, and ultimately kind of consciousness? How did that transition start for you, and how did it work?
And I more or less ask that maybe a few times every week in varying ways, in different contexts, because it certainly didn't happen overnight. It was a long, evolving process that's still ongoing, and I think it's ongoing for all those that have some unique experience that they simply cannot explain. Something very intense and profound. I call it a magical, mystical experience, and they come in many different ways, shapes, and forms. But initially, growing up in the 60s and 70s, I was always a very logical person, ascribed to reading almanacs as opposed to fiction stories. I kid you not. And we get caught up, of course, with the race to space, to the moon. So flying saucers, travel in space was obviously glorified in all media forms. And so there's a cultural bias to believing or wanting to believe in an extraterrestrial of some sort, landing on the White House lawn, as they often say. So I try to maintain that objectivity, but was always open-minded. Then in 2012, my wife and I observed in Sedona, Arizona, a beautiful area of the United States, Red Rock country, also a hot spot for a lot of UAP activity. We observed in the night sky one orange orb. It was several miles away, maybe about 500 feet in altitude at most. As I was watching it, a second one appeared either from behind it or from within it, hard to tell, but they both now existed, one a twin of the other. And I was in awe. I'm just trying to figure out what geophysical thing, trying to do the left brain analysis, thinking I could outsmart it and figure it out, but of course you can't. different theories, of course, but it left an impression. So what I wrote my first book, UFO Phenomenon, Should I Believe? I had fun with it. I'd rewrite many sections, and much has happened, of course, in the field since, around 2014 when it was published. Then, so the rabbit hole opened up a little more. You go on talk shows, etc. You meet some interesting people. I became a member of the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Research Foundation for Extraterrestrial Experiences. I worked with many physicists and scientists, Dr. Rudy Shield, Dr. Russ Scalpone, Brent Rains, many others. And we published an article based on our research of interactions with UAPs and non-human intelligences. We published that in the Journal of Scientific Exploration in 2018. Then, fast forward, 2 years later, I had a near-death experience. I had the sense of dying, suffocating, and a sense of knowingness that my colleague who I worked with in the laboratory had passed away. Later that morning, I found out that she did. It was a horrific lucid dream that I've never ever experienced before. I get the sense of realism, as people often say when they have a near-death experience or a DMT, psychedelic trip. It's undeniably vivid and etched in your mind that it is so convincing that it can drive your change in belief systems from that moment forward in dramatic ways, to the point where even significant others may not even recognize you much anymore, especially if they know you very well. You could have an intense spiritual emergency. What happened? Why me? All the associated questions. So the point is that left an impression, and I had to put it in writing. That's what I did my whole life: publish articles in journals in my scientific field. So I wrote a book, Life After Death: An Analysis of the Evidence. So I learned a great deal about consciousness, whatever that may mean. Parapsychology, near-death experiences. I talked to so many people. I learned more from interacting with people than you do through careful research in the scientific literature. And it's hard to understand what does exist out there. And that's what the film, our film, the Consciousness, is really based about, to wake people up to the fact that, hey, man, so the reality is so complex, and science does can explain some of it. We should, mainstream ignores it because much of it is anecdotal, but no, there's a lot of truth there to what we call the paranormal. I see this personally in others and in my research, through personal research and also the research in literature. Now, trying to make sense or coherent whole of all those integrated chess pieces, and I'm a chess player, is a challenge. That is essentially what the documentary is about. Consciousnessfilm.info is a website, consciousnessfilm.info. And as a producer, we're looking for supporters. If you're on your deathbed, you have deep pockets, you don't know what to do with your money, throw it our way. Point is, more importantly, you wake up even more. I had a Kundalini experience 2 years later. Something channeled through me, and I had a sense of duality. We had a feeling of bliss associated with involuntary body reactions and movements that were extreme in nature that I could not control for. I have a video of it, but it was, I'm contorting. I can't duplicate it, but my head is contorting. I look like I'm being possessed while someone is channeling something into me, causing a sensation of bliss, energy up the spine, everything consistent with what you read regarding a Kundalini awakening experience, full blown. It's a lot of Kundalini-like that really aren't Kundalini, and then from what I can tell, and not a lot out there in the literature. And then there's full blown. From what I can tell, I had the full blown. It's not a psychosis by no means. You do have great anxiety afterwards. How can you not? Oh my gosh, you're feeling bliss and your body is doing something that you just can't. So the point is this: you get a sense, the essence of the experience, you get a sense of duality.
Mm-hmm.
I feel wonderful, but my body is doing something different. That's a different kind of experience than you could ever imagine. It's hard to explain that.
Yeah.
It's like somebody trying to explain a near-death experience or that they're in love. You can't capture it. We know that. We can't capture the essence of it with language. So that's a peak experience,
Mm.
Chris. It's just one form. So I wrote the book Unseen Forces: The Integration of Science, Reality, and You. That's what the documentary is based about.
Mm.
There are unseen forces.
Yeah.
Oh, bada bing. Chris, thank you very much. I get a cheap cup of coffee in return for your purchase of the book. Thank you.
It's, going back to reading again. It's been that much audiobooks over the last wee while. My eyes have kind of developed no the best, so I'm going back to new reading glasses. But yeah,
Well, I hope it's worth the reading glasses. The
yeah,
expense
definitely,
of
yeah.
reading glasses. And the point is, we talk about Chris, as you know, and you have many guests on that address, this issue of consciousness. It's nebulous. It's very general. I ascribe to it as information exchange. Everything in a sense is conscious in the form of a simple example. You bang your head on the table, it hurts. So the table's telling you something. Don't do this again. It's conscious to that, but low level versus you and I. Humans are conscious, but in a very, of course, much more complex way. We hope than a table, but there's information exchange at every level of the universe. There's some subatomic. We can go into great deal of detail. Mind to mind information exchange, even global consciousness and
Mm.
global consciousness project, okay, where we see changes in psychokinesis, random event generators, in
Yeah,
other words, altered at 9/11 when billions of people are focusing their attention worldwide on a single event.
yeah,
We see this information exchange. You know what I'm talking about,
yeah, yeah.
Chris.
Mm.
These not, maybe, and many people in your audience do too. These non-random generate, excuse me, non-random generate, they normally act randomly.
Mm.
But here again, when Obama's elected president, when the tsunami disaster happened in Indonesia in 2004, when these catastrophic events occur, we see this non-random activity. Point is, information exchange of some type at the global level. We see it cosmologically. We see it at every level. What is that all about? We see it, of course, within the brain. But there are many questions that are generated, as you know, Chris. Um, and we have many scientists in the film, from Dean Radin, experts in parapsychology, to we just interviewed Eben Alexander, the noted neurosurgeon who had a near-death experience, who he, Chris, like you probably know Eben Alexander. He gave, after his near-death experience, he gave up his practice as a neurosurgeon and professor at Harvard University, and he's just talking about his experience, and he's lecturing. He's on all shows. He's writing all that. He's not alone.
Mm.
He's what people refer to as being flipped. When people have this type of peak experience, either again through a psychoactive drug, a UAP interaction, an interaction with a non-human entity, whether it be a gray, a machine elf, via DMT, a deceased relative, a deity,
Mm.
a supreme being, etc. And I get messages that are spiritual in nature, very personal in nature. They forecast the future, be more sensitive to the ecology of the planet, and I, as a result of all of this, that I, again, regard as real as the back of my hand, and I'm moved. It's one of the most meaningful and purposeful, intense experiences of my life, people say. And these are studies from Johns Hopkins University that say this as of 2022 in large scale population studies from DMT alone, whereby, for instance, I forget the numbers, don't quote me, but a large population of people, 1,000 plus a certain percentage who were atheists, several, 500 or so were atheists, about 40-50% of them changed their belief and now believe in a God after their DMT use. A little complicated, but the point is the DMT use changed their belief system on something just so dramatic as, do you believe in God?
Mm-hmm.
And these atheists before DMT, as I mentioned, now believe in some type of supreme being, not this white dude with a white beard in a cloud in the sky professing, all knowingness, but something more profound, or some information, all knowing.
Yeah.
I forget the terms or something. Expand the consciousness, in unconditional love. The terms we hear, Chris,
Absolutely.
but
Mm-hmm.
so we hear this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I hear from a neighbor. I read about it in a book. I hear it all the time on various podcasts. From a near death, from a UAP, from a etc. What the thing is now, Harvard, John Hopkins, they're taking it seriously.
Mm-hmm.
What the F is going on? Is it obvious questions, and you know them? Is it brain based? Is it internally generated? Is it DMT related to all of these experiences that underlie the interaction with aliens? But there are there are many similarities, but there are differences too among these different kinds of experiences. And they're not limited to just the ones we're talking about. These are more common and more seriously researched by significant researchers across various disciplines.
Mm-hmm.
And that again is what we're trying to get at in the film. The latest research, trying to capture consciousness, if there is a quantitative as well as a qualitative aspect to it, because current science unfortunately ignores the science of the subjective, what people experience, right? When you say I had a PE, a peak experience, and this is who I interacted with, and this is how I changed, science says, well, talk to your psychiatrist about that.
Mm-hmm.
Good for you. They'll recognize it. You feel good about it. Great. I'll see you tomorrow. I got to go, see if this subatomic particle is the smallest thing I ever saw in my life, with the Higgs boson thing. So, much of science, of course, is focused in materialism. We can't help that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the books are about. It's governed by that. It's a slow evolving process. But Chris, what are we getting at here? The big picture. We're at that cusp. We see the anecdotal evidence not supporting traditional science because Newtonian physics can't explain it. We understand that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a frustrating job for us. We talk to a limited group of people who get it, who resonate with this. You got to be a little open-minded. You got to be experiencers too. That helps certainly.
Mm-hmm.
And man, I don't know if you know it, you see it too. The people I meet who gravitate in the field, so many are experiences, but it takes them a while before you get it out of them,
Yeah.
before they finally admit it. You know why I know? Because I was that way.
Mm-hmm.
With each experience, I've done all the shows. I'm not patting myself on the back. I try to do PR for the film. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
you do as a producer. That can, it comes with the territory. I didn't talk about it right away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. You
Totally.
don't you, but there's a point where you just feel like you're ready to,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll tell you. But the bigger one was a Kundalini, that was heavy, big time. I mean, there's people that try to achieve that state naturally through meditation, yoga, tai chi, etc. They read about it, they strive for it, they hire mat yoga mat. Maybe they reach it next week, or maybe they never do after 3 decades. Well, whatever happened to me made my coffee taste different the next morning, pal. you
Did,
know.
did you think your peak experience was, apart from the Kundalini event, do you recognize it as the whole of the start of maybe seeing the UAP to start off with, and then it had been a process for you to where it kind of went, or you know what I'm getting at? So,
Yeah, is something? It's almost like this this phenomenon itself is like a control system where people are being given information in varying ways.
totally, it's like a feedback loop.
Yeah, whether we create it or not, or there's an external force that gives it to us, even like another coexisting intelligence that we call heaven, whatever, angels. It's a coexisting life force that maybe one theory that I tend to ascribe to long shot odds, way out there, um, spiritual guidance, whatever you want to call it. Don't screw around, no nukes, be nice, and always do step in and stuff like that. But can they manipulate our minds? Can they project holographic images in the sky? Can they influence humanity in some careful ways while allowing us free will? Whether or not it's from another planet somewhere or from our own atmosphere, even.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I don't dismiss any possibility from another dimension. Who the heck knows? But there's something.
Mm-hmm.
We're receiving information. There is information exchange at some level.
Mm-hmm.
And wherever it's coming from, excuse my expression, but holy shit.
Mm-hmm.
Holy shit. I think the answers, and many people say this, would be so profound and complex we couldn't understand it if it was given to us. But us truth seekers can't help but understand it. But yeah, it's like this control system. Getting back to your good question, is it a control system that's spoon feeding me? Here's a UFO. Here's a shared death experience. Here's a Kundalini. Let's open up the filter.
Yeah.
Let's go down the rabbit hole a little bit
Yeah.
more. Let's now not only write a book. Let's do a documentary. Let's talk to Chris and say, go to consciousnessfilm.in, that kind of thing. That info, and it, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Is someone making me do that to try to waken people up? How about you? Must say it too. And I said this to others. So why do you go to a UFO conference, Chris? Why do you do the beautiful thing you do with your podcast? You teach people, you educate them through the various discussions you have and your insight provided on these topic matters. Your audience is growing in recognition as a result, and that's something to be proud of. It's sweat equity, as we call it. It's time. Then people say to me, "Get a life." Well, I say to myself, "Get a life." You know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Chris, get a life. But it's a great hobby.
See, on the same kind of question. So from that kind of like, let's call it breadcrumbs, for example. No breadcrumbs from a Leo Elizondo type breadcrumbs, but breadcrumbs that you're maybe following from the phenomena and no realizing it. Did you ever get to the point where you may have not realized there was breadcrumbs there and then look back and there was like really, really strong synchronicities that you missed and then thought, again, wow, that was a thing that I did miss, and you maybe go back and look at it.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a very good point. Nothing that stands out, but I know other people have, where in hindsight, they now see the meaning in synchronicities. Take, for example, my co-producer. This hit me after the fact. You're kind of getting at it, but it was soon after the fact.
Yeah.
After I started the documentary, I'm trying to think how it goes. I looked up in the sky and I said, I'm going to remember constellations. I've never done this before in my life. It's a few weeks after I met him. And I saw 4 stars. And I said, let me look them up with my phone. Never did it before. And I came up with It was I live in Florida. So in the northern sky at the time, around October, November. I forget him now exactly. Deneb. I forget now. Excuse me, Deneb Vega. Um, uh, Point. I'll make it quick. The
No, it's
point is
fine.
this. The point is this. I can't remember Altair, and there was another one. The point is, in that order that I identified it, something like BD. Um, DB, Bob Davis, Dave Beatty. Those stars were in that order for the first letter of each star.
Mhm.
It's like, to me, again, you have to look at the timing and the meaning.
Yeah, totally.
It's like my wife is going on vacation with her best friend. She's pulling into uh, um, uh, a Caribbean island and Guam, and then I automatically 2 minutes later she sends me a picture of Guam as she's coming towards the island, and I've never seen this before. But then I notice a car, the license plate says Guam, and just above it says MAE,
Mhm.
May.
Right.
That's the name of our granddaughter that was born a month before.
Mhm.
So again, nothing to you, Chris, but meaning to us. Holy, timing and meaning. Our granddaughter, Guam, she sends me the picture of Guam. I mean, a coincidence. There's weirder things. We all have them,
Yeah.
but we don't often get the significance of it, either maybe a day later, if we ever get it at all.
Mhm.
Or in hindsight, once that filter opens up, or once you become a little bit aware through these different experiences, yeah, I don't know the saying, but you increase awareness, you increase your awakening, or vice versa.
Mhm.
If you become more aware that reality operates in these ways, you're more likely to see it. In other
Yeah.
words, and when I mention that to my wife and friends, then they start reporting these. Hey Bob, this is what happened to me,
Mhm.
and you know something, that pretty cool story. But then they start. It's something that you don't recognize because you're not aware of it. You know what I mean, right,
Yeah.
Chris?
Totally. Mhm.
So yeah, often in hindsight, you'll see it once the filter opens up. But right, you leave breadcrumbs, or they leave breadcrumbs.
Mhm.
And that's not necessarily a unique idea, but I see that. I always said this to my wife, from the UFO, the share death, the Kundalini, and she doesn't like it, Chris, when I go, for some reason, it's more a sense of knowingness, like there's a predator, 2 miles down behind a tree waiting for me, although I can't see it or smell it or anything, but I know it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
she doesn't like it when I say there's a puppet master at play here.
Mhm.
Um, and it's not necessarily a comforting thought for
Mhm.
myself either. I like to be in control.
Mhm.
But you do hear stories enough where, not that don't have free will, we do, but with many people, there are frequent interactions. We did that study with Free, the Dr. Dimensional Research Foundation,
Mhm.
and that we saw out of 3,200 individuals that report to interact with the UAP, with the non-human intelligence associated with it or without it.
Mhm.
It was largely non-physical, about 80% of the time, meaning they were contactees, not abductees.
Mhm.
Much less 20% of the time felt they were taken,
Mhm.
relocated, uh, and they go through all the physical stuff, the sexual encounters, the examinations, the hybrid baby. We get that, but not to any degree that Bud Hopkins and Jacobs portray it
Yeah.
in terms of its commonality. But it's more largely positive in terms of outcomes. And that again is consistent among the other peak experience triggers, near death and DMT. That ontological shock, that realization that reality is so complex, that other entities with non-human intelligence interact with us, that there's a coexisting realm that's generally non-3D, and these beings are benevolent, intelligent, provide caring, comforting messages, love, telepathically, all that. It is so profound. I can't describe it. I never had an interaction with the non-human intelligence. I'm not sure if I do, but it is generally regarded as positive. But you have to keep in mind, Chris, and you know this, the incidence varies, but anywhere from 1 to 10% or so of those who have a near-death experience regarded as very negative. Approximately 10 to 20% of those who have a UAP interaction regarded as very negative initially.
Yeah.
Initially. Over time, especially with UAP, that's a much more of a frequent event than NDEs, right? With DMT, I guess you could do it every weekend if you wanted to, right? But John Hopkins Medical Center does research with those who are more experienced DMT. I know we're going all over the place, but they are interrelated. They're interrelated.
Yeah.
We're talking about the PE, and there are different triggers of that peak experience, that ontological shock that facilitates major changes in one's belief systems on important matters of life. And we can look at statistics and look at the near-death experience literature and see divorce rate alone is about 75% in the person with their significant other within 5 years. It's 75%, something like that, much higher than the average population.
Is this after a peak experience?
After near-death experience.
A near-death experience.
It's in my mind, it hasn't been looked at for UAP or for DMT users. There's been only a few phenomenological studies of transformative effects from these peak experiences in the literature. I mean, only a few. We're at the very beginning here. But my emphasis here, there are many serious scientists who are now looking at this. And this is what is encouraging. And this is the biggest message that we can take from it. Not enough, by no means. And we still need that large-scale multidisciplinary study across many disciplines to adequately study each peak experience trigger, let alone making a comparison among them. And that's the frustrating part. I'm trying to do that. And I'm preparing an article to appear in Edge Science. I'll share it with you, Chris, and I'd be happy to come back if you wish. You can talk about it.
Really.
But looking at these here again, looking at these, I'm getting down to it. Looking at these transpersonal behavioral outcomes resulting from this long term in nature. And they can, let's not kid ourselves, they can cause great anxiety and depression in many ways. And adverse effects on one's relationships, careers, finances, etc. Let's not kid ourselves. If you go down this rabbit hole, sometimes it's of your choosing, sometimes it's not. Like a near death or UAP or DMT, it's up to you. You got to be careful with everything.
So sorry to interrupt. That's a question I was going to ask you. Just before I forget, it was on the peak experience. No kind of materialistic. I mean, in a way where in the research you've done, do you think? Obviously, you hear people with the soul contracts and things like that. But peak experience, do you think peak experience could potentially be initiated by the person subconsciously?
Can what? The peak experience can.
So it's actually initiated subconsciously by the person rather than an external force.
It's hard. It's a great question, and
I'm not meaning just having it internally in yourself, but actually something
I don't know,
initiate.
Chris, that you see it caught that question. I'll be honest with you. That question causes a great deal of frustration in me. I applaud you for asking it. And it should cause that sense of frustration because I don't have an answer. I'll be very upfront with you. I struggle with just that. That's the heart of the matter. Is it internally or externally generated? You talk about synchronicities. I was writing that.
Mm.
I was writing that today, and this article. It's on this page. We don't have the time to look at it. Okay, it's right on this page. So what's the odds of you asking me that question and me working on that? Well, whatever.
Mean in the sense where
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We're talking about the similar topics. So,
yeah. I mean,
you know.
in a sense where as well, like where
Right. The point is, I struggle with that. And that's why I said earlier, it doesn't necessarily matter.
no, it doesn't.
Objectively, you want to know the truth. Is there another realm? Are there other entities? How can we not be curious? But the bottom line, however, what's the priority is what does that realism do for you? That perception of the other realm and those entities, whether you're creating it for some reason, point is you believe it and you act accordingly. Or if it's projected from a control system or consciousness, possibly from elsewhere. And that's another theory that exists out there. Can information be exchanged among galaxies? Are they at that? Can consciousness, in other words, travel? You understand? You know what I mean? Can we advance to that level in 1,000, 2,000 years or more? But the point is that possible? And that's where futurists that's what they consider, and many consider these projections to be just that. Conscious of who knows.
On the kind of when Robert Monroe for the Monroe Institute, and some of the work he did in the past, where with out of your body experiences and things like that, and it was, I think, he has taken it by the end. It was like him initiating it, because obviously the time is all the same where he was going, and it was even to the point where him on a different plane helping himself have an out of body experience and things like that. So that's kind of generally what I was meaning, in a sense where it being real, but obviously just generated from him helping himself to actually come out his body and things like that. You know what I mean? But but it does. I mean, I know what you said. It doesn't matter either way. If it is you generating it or someone else helping you generate it or whatever, it's still trying to get the fundamental questions to it.
Yeah, and that whole concept of abduction, is it a consciousness abduction? Are you, mentally, whatever that means, consciousness, a form of energy, torsion energy, who knows what it might be, biophotons, or some speculate that might contain the essence of you and persist after the body dies. We can't quantify that at this point, but there's speculation out there, and it interacts with a torsion force that is externally driven. You see, we have some physics or quantum mechanics. I hate to throw quantum mechanics at it like it's the answer, but I think we need some of these ideas which are proven. We can see the possibility of a torsion energy existing universally, which it does. It's 99% of the universe is torsion force, and maybe the spin energy, which it is, interacts maybe with biophotonic activity generated or integrates with the brain that gives rise to consciousness, which is fundamental and primary and all that sort of jazz. But when you leave the body, maybe through an abduction that is consciousness related, that gives rise to this hyperdimensional timeless space as it is described. And that's consistent too among these different PE triggers. And you alluded to that time distortion in a sense. When you're out of the body, theoretically, you're not 3D, and the body is great at 3D stuff. We evolved from that primordial soup, if you ascribe to it. So we got the eyes and the ears and the receptors on our skin, and we do a great job with planet Earth. We're designed for it, but that's where the knowingness comes in. Am I really just from the primordial soup? When you start having these experiences, in other words, you question, okay, I am from the soup. Obviously, this is from whatever biochemical effect that's helped by plasma radiation from lightning bolts and fluid mediums, and all those organisms that are generated and all that, from inorganic to organic. We're slaves to that, but we know we're more than that. Now, if that's a delusion, I don't care. If my peak experience is a delusion, I don't care. I talked to Eben Alexander a few weeks ago. I talked to Joe McMonagle, the psychic spy, a few weeks ago at Monroe Institute up in Faber, Virginia. Remarkable. With accurate detail, he's able to detect Russian subs with tremendous accuracy without our intelligence knowing it. And he's obtaining this information next to a Coke machine, from an office next to a Coke machine on the third floor in the Pentagon. And he's proven Defense Secretary, forget his name, Bob Gates, wrong on numerous occasions, Robert Gates, and to the point where they have a feud. But the point is, Russia did it to us, we did it to them. I'm sure they elaborated on their skills, we did too. But the point is, I know this remote viewing stuff. What is that? That's out of body.
Yeah.
Call it ESP. It's a whole mess of things. It's all interrelated in some ways. I mean, there's a spectrum, just like autism, just like mental disorder. It's a whole COVID, whole spectrum. Paranormal, ESP. I mean, we don't even have the criteria, the definition of what consciousness is, UAP is, near death things. We made a progress with near death. What a DMT is, we get making progress. Again, early preliminary research is giving us some better understanding of the phenomenology of the subjective experience, the semantic experience, what it means to the person, its role in the person's life going forward, and as we mentioned earlier, the impact. And unfortunately, we don't have the adequate support systems for these people, who often don't even talk about it for fear of ridicule. We know this, and often for good reason. And where do they go if they want support? Psychologists or counselors don't necessarily advertise online, although you can find them. You know where I'm going, right? You can go to IANS, the near-death experience sites, UAP sites, and you can get leads of counselors. You can find them if you try. MUFON has them. I'm sure Scotland has it. You can try. But the point is, they're not always readily available, and you don't know the good ones. Well, word of mouth. Obviously, insurance isn't going to pay for it, so at least not here in the United States. So I know it's issues with people. I know people, Chris, who are long-term experiences in so many ways. I mean, from UFOs coming out of the water to psychokinesis, ceilings coming in when they get falling down, when they get angry, balls, I should say, rolling on the ground that occur with strong emotion, especially from children. A lot of these hauntings, are interpreted as ghosts, survival of the dead. that TV portrays that way almost
Yeah.
always, because or EVPs, electronic voice phenomenon, because it sells. It's cool.
Mm-hmm.
It may be. I'm not knocking it, but more often than not, Chris, more often than not, it's a psychokinetic effect from emotions of the person. What they're finding in experiments is that more than anything, is that emotions affect electrical systems. From TVs to microwaves to, there's a connection there. There are many people who say, I always break everything I touch breaks. You know what? Everything they touch breaks down.
I'm going to
And
talk to
it's
you about that
emotion.
later.
Huh?
I'm going to talk to you about that later when we finish.
Yeah, but there's a biophotonic effect, a stress effect, The thing is that, it's an aspect, it's another aspect of you, and maybe that's behind some of the things you were talking about too. Another aspect of you that you just never knew existed. So, what does that mean in terms of consciousness or the effects we have on the immune system, the effects we have on other people? Tremendous. Anyway, I know we're getting a little off the
No,
topic.
that's all right. I mean, you always find in these things where if you've got like ghost things in houses and that, what's always present in the house, young adolescents and a lot of emotions and all that. I mean, going off at the same time, but yeah, totally understandable with that. What about what's your kind of take on other things like connections to the phenomena, like things like CE5?
Yeah, here again, the many success stories and many misinterpretations for shooting stars, for International Space Station, for a lot of satellites. You gotta bring a lot of tools to rule out, of course, satellites, and you can, on your phone, download specific programs to rule out things that move, in the sky. But you can generally tell it's a slow trajectory course. But the International Space Station, as rare an occurrence as it is, can easily be misinterpreted as a UAP.
Yeah,
Easily.
totally. Yeah.
I've seen it. If you see it unexpectedly, you say, I guess that, you're misled. So, uh, you gotta be very careful with the CE5s. I do know people, who say, "Oh my gosh, this happened." Size of a school bus right over here, glowing, blah, 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 or I can't, okay, what does it mean? I don't know. It could be, for all I know, plasma. My best guess, plasma is poorly understood, ionized gas, fourth state of matter. Like you mentioned it before, it could even be intelligent. And we even go down that road.
Yeah.
A form of intelligence, as is like an octopus, maybe. Yeah, I'm serious. I say that like I bore you and your audience, not you, Chris, but maybe some in your audience about that. Some astrophysicists who study has down lights, Earth lights, commonly seen across the planet.
Oh, for years, for hundreds and hundreds of years. Yeah.
Yeah. The has down lights in Norway, Marfa lights in Texas, Lubbock, all over.
Yeah.
And there's a few of them, a few astrophysicists who studied it independently of each other, like Massimo Teodorini and Harvey Rutledge. Different decades, different locations, they came to the same conclusion after studying these lights. They're intelligent. They interact with people. They're symbolic. That they shine lights, trigger pulses at them, laser pulses, and they respond accordingly. But it's interesting. Again, it could. We're not talking, beings from Mars here. We're talking maybe a best guess, maybe a low life form.
Yeah.
I mean, we see stranger things in the ocean, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put it, but a lot of these UFOs could be, again, things that can morph, unique organisms. They can morph, who knows what they can do. They may even play games with your mind, make you think what I don't know. I can't even describe it. Make you think of what they think what should see, or like for them to be accepted to us, they present an image to us that's more agreeable to say something. It's not. It's usually peculiar. They don't get it. They're strange people because they're a different form. So they'll be I don't even know how to explain this, but their language is sometimes symbolic. You don't interpret them literally. It's symbolic, it's cold. They're obviously going to be different. So of course they're terrified. They terrify people, especially if they look reptilian or insectoid in the UAP cases. But
Yeah.
but here again, the mantis creatures regarded as powerful, all-knowing, and people over 10 interactions regard them as wonderful. So here again, this is what our studies show. Getting back to that, Chris, the more frequent interactors, 80% of something like 1900 of the frequent interactors did not, over 85% did not want their experience with the UAP and non-human intelligences to end. So it says something that is quite pronounced. People who also have near-death experiences, they don't want it to end either. And they plead with this. We know these stories. I'm just rehashing, trying to put pieces together into a coherent whole, draw the similarities together if they should exist among these kind of triggers, and attempt to make better sense of consciousness through the documentary, to have again scientists and experiences elaborate on it, and experiences. This is not pure science. It's not talking heads kind of a documentary that Dave Beaty with Dreamtime Entertainment and I are doing. It incorporates experiences. People who've had, we just talked again with Eben Alexander, a near-death experiencer, and others up at Monroe Institute who have had out-of-body experiences. Robert Monroe more or less developed the technique for the out-of-body experience, and many thousands attend their courses online, monroe.org, and try to achieve that state for medical, physical, as well as spiritual, psychological benefit. It's a wonderful thing, and we had a very productive time there, interviewing wonderful people, and we now look forward to going out west to various colleges and to interview people at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which does a lot of research in the area of consciousness studies, brain science, science of the subjective, so to speak, and trying to again integrate aspects of what is considered as paranormal, ESP, psychokinesis, healing at a distance. It comes in many different ways, channeling even, but to do it and using the scientific methodology and as best as possible, try to establish a better understanding of how it can be incorporated into the human condition to improve human potential and benefit, of course.
What do you, from what you've studied and researched, what is your take on the recent, obviously, I'd say recent, I mean, but disclosure process kind of happening now since like 2017? I know the disclosure process has been a lot longer than that, but what is your general take on it? And even now, where if you follow the interviews, somebody like Louise Elizondo or even Gary Nolan and stuff like that, and sometimes they even talk about maybe they do talk about a consciousness aspect of it as well, and not just like ETs and stuff like that. So, what's your general kind of take on that, if you can follow it?
Yeah, it's complicated. There's a physical element, but there's also a non-physical element to UAPs. That needs to be said up front. There's more of a non-physical that's unfortunately largely ignored by the general UFO community, UAP community. Probably always exists, and that's why we'll never make any true advance to understanding what governs and regulates its behavior, because it is largely non-physical. meaning there is telepathic communication, meaning there are message downloads, there are healings that do occur through interactions. There is paranormal activity that does occur as well. There is meaningful interaction that should not be ignored. So, do they pose a military threat? Doesn't seem to be. If anything, we pose more of a military threat to ourselves. They shut the nukes off, in the form of a message to both the United States and Russia back in the 60s on several occasions. And thankfully they did, assuming that's all valid, and it seems to be. But we still, regardless, have to be very careful who we listen to. We're still consumers. We have to be very, very cautious, not interpret everything we hear literally from anyone in ufology, anyone, including myself. I don't have the answers, but when we have people with backgrounds, look, I appreciate the disclosure. Why people don't think people that were interested in these flying saucers are nuts anymore, disclosure is cool at that level, but it's not really disclosure. I don't know what disclosure is, meaning what? Disclosure to me is if Pentagon, Navy, Air Force, President goes on TV that night and says a non-human intelligence from somewhere, we don't know where. It could be from Mars, it could be from the ionosphere of the planet, on the wherever. It's interacting with human beings. Have a good night, everybody.
Yeah, I understand that exactly.
That's to me, that's disclosure.
I still use the analogy. Sorry to cut you off. I use the analogy of, even if a UFO landed in the White House lawn, which people always refer to, half the world would still disbelieve it anyway.
Don't show me the evidence. My mind's made up. And too often that occurs.
On the aspect of what you referred to, in regards to like maybe in the 60s and stuff, with UAP or UFOs, like we want to call them these days, probing nuclear sites, turning off nuclear silos and stuff like that, and then coming a bit fast forward, and where there's even been potential stories of frequencies and such, like engaging the phenomena, or maybe even pulling the phenomena in. Does that sound like to you more like maybe no part of the phenomena, but maybe more like an AI type thing?
Yeah. I know Gary Voorhees, who was in a few episodes of Skinwalker Ranch, for instance, and was in documentary that David Beaty, who's co-producing this consciousness connection documentary I'm doing. He was also the radar technician on the Nimitz, and Dave Beaty did the Nimitz encounters.
Yeah.
He got 6 million hits on that. So it's extremely talented. And the point is, Gary Voorhees says, who's also worked on the movie Tear, the documentary Tear in the Sky. That 1.6 megahertz, is it? Or the gigahertz, I forget, but there's a frequency signature that seems consistent, robust. They see it off the coast of San Diego. And could it be, again, AI, something, right? It does, here again, is it manufactured by the Navy or externally driven, or breadcrumb? That's associated with the opening up of a portal in the sky, as some people claim it is associated with a significant decrease in temperature too. I forget exactly what, but it's it's supposed to be a little bit of a complex event. Uh, who knows what that's about? But it goes back to also to plasma. It's like you start researching plasma, and then you come across, guess what? The Navy in 2018, U.S. Navy applied for a patent.
That's right.
Late, you know what I'm talking about? The
Yeah.
laser induced, help me out, laser induced filament, infrared filament, LIP, photon filament, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
LIP, whatever. Point is, it's a stealth device. They shoot a laser out of a destroyer or ship of some type, a large ship, and it creates an image in the sky um, of a plane
Mm-hmm.
that simulates a plane. It's a holographic image of a plane,
Mm-hmm.
and your enemy's radar, etc., is going to think it's a plane and be detracted as a result. Shoot its weapons to it.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of fighting, that's a big advantage, and that's all I know. It makes sense, right? So the thing is, so you have this kind of technology out there, and obviously, when you see a lot of people on these ships, like the USS Ronald Reagan or you don't know, although it's been discounted. I have great respect for the work Dave Beaty does, and I can't applaud him enough, man. There's a few other people out there that try to get at what's really true in terms of what are these people on board the decks of ships, not only in the United States, reporting when they do see glowing lights of some type. They describe it, and they do come out and discuss it now. They're encouraged to even do so. And they do talk about it. So, what is that all about? Could it be holographic projections? Could it be laser-induced patterns that are created using, stealth radar technology with USS ships? Who knows what's out there, as well as the drones? So, what percent is actually real? What's a true UAP? What's true disclosure? I don't know. And who do I believe? Luis Elizondo? Why Luis Elizondo with his background, and he may be 100% true and kind and sweet. He seems like a wonderful person, but look, why couldn't we get Ned? Ned the tailor who's into UFOs. He's from Detroit, Michigan. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Why with a counterintelligence background would you want anyone calling the shots to the public about what's going on with UAPs? It just more of the same to me.
Yeah, I know.
He maybe had the right heart. I don't know. Given the history of UAP, I can't trust that.
No, I understand. I totally understand where you're coming from with that. It'll be interesting to see if anything does come out in the future, or what understanding what they think. We'll never ever hear the total truth anyway. I mean, whatever they come out with, but I just find it interesting sometimes when there is the odd breadcrumb there, but it's alluding to the whole consciousness aspect or DNA aspect. And there's one comment that Gary Nolan said recently as well, which I know he done some work as well in regards to stuff. And no link to the Elizondo, but it was mainly it was in an interview he done it, and it was actually somebody asked him a question about why would it not be kind of the actual disclosure being let out there or whatever? And they said, well, maybe it's scary, or maybe it's that. And one of the words they said, well, what if we found out we were farmed for some reason? Obviously, that was hypothetical, right? But interesting thing was I just had finished a book on Robert Monroe's book, and he spoke of a thing called Lush, which was the based on energy that we give off, and that's why we're here and farmed and stuff, and then reincarnate and all that. You know what I mean? But I'm not going right into that because it's really, really deep. You know what I mean? But understanding it. But I just found that quite interesting because it was just like totally the same concept. That disclosure wise though, it's a funny one. Like, you know what I mean?
It is. It is a funny one, and you know, yeah, I give Navy credit. Air Force is they don't say anything, at least here in the United States. So they leave it to the Navy to deal with it all. Which is curious to begin with. They don't want to get their hands dirty with the UAP issue, but they're not going to disclose fully because, and they'll couch it on the military threat. And they don't just dismiss the possibility it's China either, only because they're hired, they're brainwashed into believing that they are in control and they have to protect the public, and they know they have no answer, they have no clue what's going on, they know it's real. And they have no answer for it. So if they're going to tell the truth that these non-human entities are in fact interacting with human beings and agreeing these beings, 4 foot tall or whatever, can come walking through your wall at night and take you on board the ship. It's rare, but guess what? It can happen.
Yeah.
And you know what? You voted for us, you pay taxes, and we can't do anything about it. You know, they don't want to be in that position.
Totally.
You know, it's not only embarrassing, it's scary as hell for too many people. I'm sorry. You know, that's something like, you know, if you had to push me, Chris, I try to be a scientist like this, right? Belief, no belief. You try to be down here. If you ask, put a gun to my head, Bob, do you believe in, consciousness is primary? It interacts with non-human entities in some strange way. I go a little belief. You know, there's still the brain in me. There's still the ego in me. You're still the slave of something that resists it. You see, that's why it's like having that kundalini, and you're like, I was feeling bliss, my body's doing this, and it's almost as if you're resisting the truth.
Yeah.
It looks like a struggle. If you were watching the video of me, you don't need to see it, and I'm embarrassed by it because it looks so strange. But it's like the left brain can't deal with the fact that, I'm not in control. It's I try. You see how I try to rationalize it to make the point to you and your audience, and you get it. I know you get it, Chris. And I appreciate that. Make the point to your audience that it's that perplexing, a subjective experience that can't be described. And many people in your audience, they get it because they have had unusual experiences themselves that they can't express very definitively or clearly, I should say, to others, right? Chris, you tell me stories. I wholeheartedly appreciate what you share with me. I get it, and I don't get it. It's like when I speak, you get it, but you don't get it. And there's no way you can. You see, that's what we lack, that science of the subjective. How do we capture it, put that in a bottle, and take it to the mainstream scientist, as hardcore as he or she is, and say, guess what, man? This is evidence. It makes a lot more sense than your formula for aspirin or anything else you got going on. This is what's real. It's what I experienced.
Yeah.
It's not a test tube. It's not math. It's not, 1 and 1 is 2. I get it. And that's important. We're on the planet Earth. We need that shit, but you get it. We don't integrate the subjective. We know that, but we don't make the effort to use it as a basis for adding validity to our experience and our understanding of what reality is. That's the problem. So reality to us is a Higgs boson particle. It's a subatomic particle, and there's nothing more. Okay, let's make things smaller. Let's find smaller subatomic particles, and eventually have an Apple iPhone the size of a little tiny, sand. You can't use it, but you can put that into other iPhones. That's where we're going. A geometric increase in technological IA. We'll get there, and maybe we do experience that. And over time, it's the same old suit, same story. Excuse me, I said it wrong. Same stories we go through, different suits, different time and place, same story. When I was a kid, in other words, a little older than you, Chris, but I'm not that old. But when I was a kid, I used to say, we had the Vietnam War going on. We had riots, in Chicago, and black, whites, and black people were just fighting for votes here in the United States back in the city. You know the scene. I'd say to myself, things have got to be better when I'm much older. Well, you know what I'm going to say? You know what I'm going to say? I'm much older. No. What my grandkids are going through, we get it. It's heavy with COVID and then some. Heavy.
Yeah.
And like you say, that AI, right? Technology is going up here, but spiritually, nothing. So the gap widens. That and the need for that paradigm shift is so critical to close the gap. Look at the mystical, the spiritual, the subjective, however we want to call it. Integrate it somehow in terms of our ability to measure it, capture it, and integrate it with the physical in a way where you can make valid conclusions about an aspect of reality that is perceived as very real by people who experience these things. You see, and how do you convince mainstream science that maybe DMT or psychoactive drugs can be very therapeutic, because it does create that kind of ontological shock that does result in very dramatic effects that are very positive.
In the kind of spiritual side of it, or even going back and even now, like esoteric or mysticism, that seemed to, they kind of teachings seem to kind of hack the consciousness. And if you know what I mean, so like maybe create out of body experiences and things like that back in the past, or other things you look at as well, where, let's say, for example, you get people doing, it's not a thing I'm into, but let's say you get people doing CE5, or you get the contactees back in the day, or you get like the Theory Society and things like that. And them pulling together is almost like a kind of a ritualistic aspect to it as well, which is pulling in something. Almost like hacking it, or almost like kind of pulling something together to do that. And there's teachings that are like being like kind of Gnostic teachings or whatever, things like that as well, which is engaged with the phenomena. And I just think it's probably for the whole, going back to like the whole disclosure thing. I think the only way we're going to find things out or find any answers is going within, or looking further within, and looking at things like what you're doing, and like the consciousness connection, and things like that. You know what I mean?
I appreciate that. I resonate with it, and here again, you're doing your thing. I'm trying to get the word out to a large audience, and I'm not trying to make money on it. It has a big toll on both me and Dave, and as well as we work together and appreciate one another and complement each other so beautifully. It is hard work, but it is beneficial to us. We do enjoy it a great deal, and the main thing is to get it out to humanity. And so consciousnessfilm.info, there is a GoFundMe link there if people want to donate $1 or anything they can to help, with travel and other related expenses. That would obviously be appreciated. And thank you again for the forum to discuss all this, and all you do along these lines, Chris. Thank you.
No, totally, more than welcome. There's one more question I want to ask you, just before we kind of wrap up, and to do with the consciousness aspect there, and what do you think's changed in? I'm just trying to think of the word this. Why do you think it seems to be the there needs to be a need for speeding up of the kind of bringing up humanity, or making them more spiritual, or making them more involved in consciousness, because there seems to be, if you've dealt with a lot of experiences with the work you've done, and it seems to be like maybe some type of event or some type of change in consciousness or that. Could you discuss that a wee bit about that before you finish?
You know, Chris, it may not be more that's occurring with the times. It's happening to me. It's speeding up with me. It does with a lot of people. Why, I don't know. It could be personality, sensitivities, random, who knows. But people throughout the ages have had the same thing. If anything, people talk about it less now, for fear of ridicule, job, career, relationship, stigma associated with it. Probably is more pronounced here, especially in the West. It's very so culturally biased. You know, if the things I said to you, if I say it in certain countries, in East, they regard me as a shaman, a truth seeker. I'd be regarded highly. And here, it could be just the opposite by many people. So it depends on perspective of belief systems. It's very generic, very general. This has always happened. You know, there's people lived on psychedelic medicines all the time in their culture, and they used it to their benefit. And if the point is, people have diverted to organized religion for so many years. That's gotten us nowhere, and now there's a movement away from that to spiritualism. And you can make a case for that being a lot less destructive. But along with that spiritualism is that search for truth. And if there's anything good to social media, it's people like you who facilitate that desire in others, who trying to seek the truth. And that's the bottom line too here. We have these questions that we all share for personal reasons and otherwise, but especially for personal reasons. Because we know there's more. We woke up, and that's why I want to share what I woke up, to wake other people up. Dave wants to do the same thing. He's starting to go down the rabbit hole. He's starting to have incredible synchronicities, and I warned him. You know, breadcrumbs, spoon feeding. You know, little of this. I don't know what you want to call it, or not. You know, listen, man, keep doing what you're doing. You have really good guests on, and I applaud what you're doing out there in Scotland, especially so late at night.
We'd just like to thank Bob again for coming on the show, and we'll leave multiple links in the show notes on the Consciousness Connection, which is the up-and-coming documentary with Bob Davis and David Beaty on all nature of consciousness. You can also find info on that at consciousnessfilm.info. Have a nice night, everyone, and we'll catch up with you soon.